You're listening to New Youth Radio, a show about global culture and local youth.
Today on the show, we have an interview with Carmelina Moscato on the line from Madison, Wisconsin. Carmelina is a member of the Canadian national women's soccer team that recently won bronze at the Summer Olympics. Thanks to our guest interviewer Rob Brandstetter for bringing us this interview, where we'll gain an insight into Carmelina's incredible journey to the Olympics. Now, we don't normally cover sports on our show, but Carmelina is such a great role model, especially for young women in sports, and she was born and raised in Mississauga, which is just a stone's throw away from us here in Guelph.
You've had a really long career. You've been there at such a young age at the national level. Must have been quite a ride.
You know, at first I was just scouted kind of as a youth talent, but at that time they were scouting the country all over again. They wanted to start from the bottom up. So basically, I'd been part of that first generation that was, we hosted a U19 World Championship. During that time in '02, for whatever reason, the tournaments had kind of captured the country. So we had that whole generation. We came second to the state. Since then, I would say '02 was the beginning of, I think, something special with that group of girls. And all of us have had really different journeys arriving at, you know, if you talk about that till now, 2012, we've all had incredibly different journeys. Like, for example, I wasn't even part of the program for 5 years.
This weekend you said you were busy scouting for, was that for a school?
Yeah, I've recently taken a new job and kind of a new path, new journey. I'm the assistant coach at the University of Wisconsin here in Madison. So I've moved, I'm living here now. My primary duty is going to be international recruiting, so both Canada and beyond. Yeah, so I had my first recruiting event back because I coached during that 5-year stint when I was away. I did coach at the University of Louisville.
Now, out of curiosity, is coaching something that you plan on transitioning into as a future career?
I know it's going to be in my future. I don't know to what capacity. I think that's kind of in the most humble way up to me in terms of how much I want to go for it. I think right now I still want to play. You know, after the Olympics and the result, collectively, individually, I've been a little bit inspired. So I still want to play, and the coaching thing is my priority at this exact moment. However, I'm probably going to be balancing a bit of coaching and playing in my near future.
You've played in Italy and in Sweden as well?
When I came back to the game in '09, I'd quit my job and kind of took a risk to see if I could try my career again. I'd quit my job and I had nothing to really fall back on. Lucky enough, I got that opportunity with the national team, but I knew I needed to prove myself after being away for so long. So I took the first offer that came my way, and that was an Italian club, so I signed for 10 months. I went to northern Italy, played. Crazy enough, just kind of got my feet back and my game back a little bit. And then Sweden was more recent. After the 2011 World Cup, I went to Sweden for 3 months. Yeah, it was good to get that experience. I've always said I wanted to play overseas.
I heard a good interview with you on the CBC, and I was wondering if you could just describe a little bit of your maybe early soccer history in terms of what started you off. Who was your first early coach and mentor?
Yeah, well, my brother. I have no hesitation saying that. My brother and another coach with Dixie, and I think he's now with Mississauga Soccer Club, but his name is Emilio Bernardo. And he definitely scouted me from kind of, that house league age. I was 10 years old, but gave me that next kind of, you might be a rep player. And at that time, obviously, it's a big deal when you're a kid like that. And so I would say around 10 years old, Emilio and my brother Joe took on this club team, this Dixie club team. We went on from U10 to U17. We had that continuity, we had that growth together, and I would say, at Dixie Soccer Club, that was definitely the biggest part of my development. I got to a point where I could start to refine my next skills, and I was identified with Ontario, and then from Ontario, I went to the ranks. So Ontario identified me, and then I got invited to my first youth national team camp, and I wouldn't have got there without those basic skills and know-how and, technical ability we learned with that club. So, yeah. Huge part of it. My brother's been my mentor my whole life, and he still is, so pretty special.
What training for something like the Olympics, such a high-end performance event, what training for that looks like? Maybe a little snapshot or what a day in the life of an Olympic athlete training and preparing would look like.
I think you look at it as you get 4 years, like your cycle is 4 years. So within the first 2, you're maintaining a certain level of fitness and you're obviously peaking at certain times due to different events. But at the end of the day, you're building a base, 4-year base, if you can imagine that. And there's something that's something I'm looking to understand a bit better, the periodization. But I do think it's about peaking at the right times, but also taking your rest. And I think that's where a lot of athletes go wrong, where you can go as hard as you want and you can peak for certain events, but if you don't give yourself that mental, emotional, and physical break, Could you step away for a week, 2 weeks, whatever that may be, according to your trainer? Some people just want to hit it hard at all times, and I think that that's the biggest mistake. So for us, in terms of now arriving at the World Cup, we have two extreme examples. The World Cup, we came 16th in the world. 1 year later, we came third in the world. I believe we worked a lot smarter. We did a lot of work in the weight room, a lot of off-field strength and conditioning to make our bodies balanced, strong. We worked on our running mechanics. We incorporated Olympic lifting. Some things that we've never experienced as athletes, which just would baffle some people. Most elite athletes use Olympic lifting as probably their primary multi-joint explosive movements, coordination, etc. I mean, some of us were introduced for it for the first time. I'll speak for myself. We were introduced to a different level and a different quality of training than we had been with other regimens. So that's number one. Finding the right trainer who knows what to do for the sport of soccer. I was listening to this podcast about training for soccer and was understanding that soccer is about 30 to 40 years behind the 8 ball when it comes to strength and conditioning, which is ridiculous to think about how we have a lot of work to do off the field to become a better sport overall. So I think we found a trainer that is really in tune with just making us better athletes. So a typical day, going back to your original question, was some days we're just focused on the strength and conditioning part, and some was on-field conditioning, and then some was just tactical work, technical work. So every week was a variety of those things, and it was truly about finding the balance between those components of a program. So I think that's what we nailed in this last year. Was we worked hard during certain periods of time. Strength was our focus. Power was our focus. Tactical was our focus. Then we went from, we need a break. We need social and emotional part of the pie needs to be addressed. So go on with your friends. Go home with your family. They really did have a balanced program.
I'd actually like to hear a little bit about those areas. You talked about maybe taking a break from those things, but are there things that you do maybe on a regular basis? I don't know, meditation or what, but in terms of how do you regulate yourself mentally, and how do you deal with these social emotional aspects, and how do you keep yourself under control and dedicated?
This past year, I've really figured out that yoga and spending time with your own body and yourself is a very powerful tool. I think the more open you are, generally, literally and figuratively speaking, the more open you are, your hips, your ankle mobility, your chest, everything, the more balanced you are posturally, the better athlete you are, the more aware person you are. There is a connection. I feel like in yoga, it's like you're releasing of the demons. I know it sounds really crazy, but it's truly opening your body up and allowing yourself to be exposed to different things. And I know that sounds a bit spiritual, and it's meant to be. So I do think that a lot of athletes are tight, and it's due to our stress. It's due to the sports that we play. But I think it's our job as athletes to reverse what your sports does. You can look at any physique and see that somebody is a hockey player. They have a certain way to them. They have a certain look. Maybe their shoulders are rolled in. Maybe their hips are super tight, whatever it is. And I think, if you can reverse those things and be able to keep yourself as balanced as you can, you're going to be that much better for your team, yourself, and everything else. So yoga has been transformative for me. Yeah, and it's something that I take very seriously. We did mobility as a team, so we didn't do it in that meditative sense where it's like a hot room perhaps and a mat and you're with your body, but we did it as a team. And so we did this mobility series every day for the last 2 months leading up to the Olympics, and watching myself run, because we watch every game and practice and everything else, so watching myself run prior to having that regimen, and then at the Olympics I was finally running properly. I had full hip extension for the first time in my career, doing my due diligence with the hip stuff and mobilities and opening them up. At that level, any little inch is going to help you, any little bit. I'm not the fastest player, so I have to keep myself at least mobile, at the very least, so that I can work within my means.
Tell me a little bit more about mental discipline, and how do you not let maybe emotions get ahead of you when you're in the middle of the game? I know your games towards the end of the Olympics were pretty intense and emotional, especially the game against the U.S. I think that was pretty shattering for fans and players alike. How did you as a team, or maybe even yourself, maybe if you could talk a little bit about the role of mental discipline to hold things together when things get really emotional during performance?
Well, I have to give credit to Kerry Evans, he's a forensic psychologist, okay? So a lot of people would wonder what the heck he's doing with the soccer team. He was a footballer himself. He played center back in the English Premier League for 10 years. So he has a strong, and he's like an icon in New Zealand. Currently, he works with criminals, essentially, and it's kind of funny to think that. But he's come into our group and he told us there is no such thing as sports psychology. And we're like, okay, what does that mean? And he said, well, it's always at the end of the day, regardless, about humans performing under pressure. Right from the beginning, he reframed the way we thought about pressure. And he talked about how there's expectations, scrutiny, consequences. That's what creates pressure, and then it goes into, we call it the pressure cooker of your mind. And you have two ways to go. So you can go in the red, which is completely based on myth, negative feedback cycles, emotional responses, ape behaviors, which is like aggressive,
Sure.
passive, and escaping. You know, we talked about the fight, flight, responses, and those types of things. That's all in the red. Those are things that are useless in soccer and in life. And then he talked about the transition towards bluehead. We call it bluehead with our group. And bluehead was a point where that was reality. You were able to stay on task. You're able to process things for what they are in terms of you can analyze, you have clear thinking. And our slogan for the bluehead was light, bright, and clear. So when we arrived at the Olympics, that was our goal from a mental standpoint, to arrive light, bright, and clear. And it painted a picture for us where, you know, when you have those types of responses, everything is a solution-oriented response. For the first time in my entire life, I realized that soccer does not have to be emotional. We made it a job in which I enjoy, but I knew my task. Like, I knew what my role was, and I knew exactly what my team needed from me as a center back. Not me as Carmelina Moscato, me as a center back. So it was up to me as Carm to fill that role, if that made sense. So all those standards that were held, it wasn't personal. It wasn't about what I could or couldn't do. And he talked about this trifecta. To my job as a center back, they had everybody's, but mine, for example, was like a mindset, a skill set, and a structure. So I had to understand all three aspects of my job from those perspectives. And this is all part of the mental stuff as well. So when I framed my job, and I made a pass, and I didn't connect the pass. It wasn't structured, because the person was in the right spot at the right time in our shape. It wasn't mindset, because it was a forward pass, and we're looking to be pitched. So the decision was good, but it was a skill set. I was on my left foot for a long time. So I was attempting passes that I knew I couldn't do with my left, and I continually had experienced failure. Until I worked on my left foot enough that my skill set fit the job role. I had to work within my means. I wasn't going to hit a long ball with my left foot 60 yards like I can with my right. I couldn't. I was asked to do it, and I couldn't do it. So I had to work on my short game, work on my possession stats, and then on my own time, I sharpened my left foot to the point where now my left foot filled the criteria for that job. If you were to ask me 2 years ago, it would be about, well, who I am, you know, the person I wish I could be. It was about all the worst things, about things that were completely unproductive at that level. And for the first time in my life, people mentioned to me after watching our performances, they say, "Carl, oh my God, you look so composed." I swear no one's ever said that to me before as a player. And sometimes you look nervous, and I've made rash decisions, and all these things, and I was just like, there was nothing left to my imagination. And so when you're that secure in your job and yourself eventually, like I worked on trusting myself, because at some point you got to let go too. You know, you can't micromanage, you can't control everything. You're going to play some games, you're not going to play some games. And that's a maturity that comes, I think, with age. You know, you can't control all the aspects of the environment. So once you let go, do what you can do at the best of your ability. If I didn't even make that roster, I swear on everything, I would have walked away like completely fulfilled and happy, because I couldn't have given more. I couldn't have. I knew that. You know, when you are in that state of mind, and when you're in that place, when you're able to give everything you got, there's really nothing you can say at the end of the day. We walked away from that experience, bronze medal or not, having played some of the best soccer all of us have ever played in our lives. And you talked about that game against the States, right? Like kind of rebounding back from heartbreak and loss and all the rest of it. And so, you know, how they handled it was extremely admirable. I mean, as a group, if you were on the bus, I really wish you weren't. You know, I'm glad you weren't, because you would have heard some things that, you know, it was just angry. Everybody's first reaction was complete and utter anger, and that we had been robbed. You know, even publicly, what are we saying? Oh, the refs this, refs that, and all the rest of it. I think it took us 24 hours to figure out, you know, as a group, and some took a little longer than others, but we did give up 4 goals at the end of the day, first of all. And second of all, we sat in a room, and we looked at each other, and we had like a team meeting without the coaches that the captains held for Ian Wilkinson and, you know, Sinclair and all the rest of them, Diana, and everyone's like, get it out. Like, whatever you're saying in your rooms to each other, all that, negative talk, whatever the heck you guys are saying, say it right now to the group. Say it to everyone's face. And we had some emotional responses. Some people were saying, this was that, and this person could have done this. And it became personal to some extent, too. It was hard. It was hard to hear. And then we realized, guys, good, get it out, it's done, but we have a lot to play for. So get over yourself, essentially, and put those things aside, because at the end of the day, what has got us here, and it was our connection. And we found a way to reconnect. And our coaches had put together not only the most perfect game plan for France, but they had put together a motivational video, and they put it on, and it was top notch. Like, it was really well done, and it started our whole journey. It started from the first game we ever played with John, so back in September, and it showed us all these like amazing goals we scored, and like the music on it was perfect. Everyone's crying, and then all of a sudden they start showing on top of these things like quotes. So people from all over Canada, like Steve Nash and the Foy family from Nevins, Ontario, like families and celebrities and other gold medalists, and people were tweeting about us, writing about us, Globe and Mail this, Toronto that, and it was like one of the best games ever played in sport history. Your narrow focus becomes quite big, and you're able to take a step back and say, guys, we're part of something incredible here. Yeah. Like, we're in the Olympics playing for Canada. Like, we almost forgot that. You needed to be reminded where the heck you were and how much we had to play for, and then essentially, brought you right back to life. And then we had our team meeting about France. And we were all in a state of mind in the blue head again to realize, okay, what's our job? Let's go get that bronze medal. Let's go get a medal, because, at the end of the day, we wanted to see our two goals were we wanted to see our flag rise. We wanted to see our flag go on the podium. And we also wanted to leave the sport better than when we had come in 10 years ago.
What I'm kind of interested in is that following the game from the U.S., such an emotional event, and you see a lot of teams often will collapse after something like that, and they cannot get it together to play that bronze medal match and be successful. But what I'm hearing from you is that, one, there's a lot of great emotional processing amongst your team and support there, as well as, I guess, the role of coaching that helped you, like you say, get into that clear space again, where you could go back to being that well-disciplined group.
Absolutely. I mean, the leadership was definitely so strong. And I think John and his staff and every single member of that staff was carefully picked. I think you have to role model things in life. It's one thing to say it, and then there's a credibility factor. And I think the fact that every single day they role modeled what they expected from us, like their diligence, their attention to detail, the presentations this guy put together. I was like, did you sleep last night? Like, how the heck did you do this? And every single day he came to the table with something better than the last. And that's what he expected from us, from our performance. In the first 3 games of the Olympics, he said, you guys are not even close to what I see for this team. He's like, when are we going to break free? When are we going to do this? When are we going to allow ourselves to be what we were meant to be? And then it started with the Great Britain game. Well, no. It started with that tying goal against Sweden, which allowed us to get the draw against Great Britain. Mm-hmm. So that tie put us third in our group, which meant that we played first in one of the other groups, which was Great Britain. We had an opportunity to beat the home team, the home nation, in front of 30,000 people. So then the journey began, right? So we handedly beat them. Our game plan was flawless. Then our game plan was even more flawless. So the diligence on the staff side prepare us in the way that they did. So I can't even imagine the hours of film and researching and stuff that they had to do. It's all statistically driven, though, with those guys, too. So, all the work that they've done to prepare us, and people said, you guys played the state, like, even just straight up tactically, like, incredibly well. And it was just, like, all tribute to our staff. Yeah, we executed. Our journey was from good to great, and we executed. I think we arrived on that day relative to the potential of the group. But it was definitely top-down. And he empowered us as leaders, like, we all led in different ways. Like, we had a leadership group, but I consider myself a leader in my own way, and it wasn't about being part of the leadership group. We all took responsibility for what we were part of that family. Like, we all did our part. It was so beautiful how it all came together. It was just so crazy. A lot of work, though, just a lot of self-awareness. I have to throw that out there, because I think without self-awareness, that growth wouldn't have happened. So I think we all had to take a hard look in the mirror about who we were being with the group and what we were offering the group. And I think that was a year-long journey where people actually finally realized, okay, listen, I need to change certain aspects of my, we talked about a vampire-free zone,
Yep.
Vampire life suckers.
That's right.
And so when you found yourself speaking negatively, like, it's such a basic thing. It's like you tell your kids that. in these high-level environments, you don't get playing time, and the first thing you're doing is, excuse my language, but bitching with your roommate. It's kind of like it doesn't stop when you're older, but you have to be aware of these things to always put the team first. And I think that he changed that as well. That was a huge area of weakness that we had, was the vampire culture that I think people would bring just due to old habits.
And you had mentioned a little earlier on about the role of spirituality and being spiritual, and of course awareness practice connects, I think, pretty deeply to that. I'm wondering if you could talk just a little bit about spirituality or that role in making you a strong elite athlete as well.
I think the spiritual side is harder for me to put into words. Mostly I would say maybe my vocabulary for it is a little different. It makes sense intuitively, but I don't always know how to say things. But for me, I grew up Catholic, and so for me it was I think that's an amazing way to grow up, in the sense of it teaches you and everybody that is a practicing Catholic so many fundamental core values and things that I take to heart, completely. In terms of how I practice my spirituality, I think that, there's a piece, God is like either externally viewed, and he's somebody you look up to, that's outside of you and that you have to answer to, or that you're praying to, or whatever. But I also think there's also God is within you. So there's two ways to kind of look at that. And when God is within you, if you think of it that way, as a creator or the spirit or whatever you want to call it, I think, first of all, it's empowering to think that, you have a purpose, and your purpose is not always going to be clear in life, but I think the more time you can spend connecting with yourself and your soul, and obviously through others, your soul is revealed, of course, so by interacting and you kind of learn things about yourself. Everybody's a mirror, So if you can look at life that way, you're always in a state of self-improvement and self-awareness. There's not one thing that happens by accident, in my opinion. So I think that in my life, because I've taken that on, in soccer it meant no different. In soccer, every opportunity was an opportunity to grow and to learn about myself. So instead of taking it as, for black and white, for what it was, a good feeling, a bad feeling, it was more than that. There was a lesson associated with every time I didn't play. Every time I had an interaction or altercation with a teammate on the pitch or something along those lines. It's okay, so what is that bringing out of me? What could I have done differently? So when you're in that constant state of self-improvement, it's truly powerful. It's like very, very empowering. And nothing will really get you high and nothing will really get you low when you view life like that. So that's how it tied in for me. And I think the most powerful moment of my journey was when we were in the Swiss Alps, in Cran, Montana, it was called, Switzerland, preparing for London 2 weeks before the event. And me, Candace Chapman, and Emily Zur were competing head-to-head for playing time. Us three center backs were like neck and neck. Some days I thought I had blew it out of the water, but it was never, maybe Emily started the next game. Like, it was never clear who was really, it was clear in the sense of, we all knew we were pretty equal, but everybody brought something a little different. Us three center backs are very different. So what was he going to do at the end of the day? Oh, my God, it was a big mystery, and you're this big event's coming up, and you'd feel like you're stressed out of your mind. So I let it get the best of me for a little bit, for about a week there. I wasn't myself. I was overconsumed. I wasn't balanced. I lost my balance. And I just looked at it, I was like, okay, this is not how I want my experience to be. I don't want to go through the tournament every single game being pissed off if I don't get to play. It's not, I want to enjoy my career. So I said, I'm going to let go of everything. Whatever John says, whatever John decides, right, he's the decision maker, I am okay with, and I promised myself I would be okay with. And then as soon as that happened, I just feel like, it sounds cheesy, but the stars aligned. Like, it was like the weirdest thing. Like, I truly let go of all of it. And so I guess spirituality kind of helped me get there.
And I guess what I hear in that, and I hear as a theme in some of your discussion, is that notion of letting go of your ego, of not, feeling like you need to have things revolve around you, that there's something larger and bigger that you're participating in.
Perfectly said. Yeah, it was letting go of my ego. I think a lot of decisions we make are ego-driven, and ego's never fulfilled. So.
Yeah. It's no good on a soccer field either.
It has no purpose. It serves no purpose on a soccer field, exactly.
if you could describe, what's your life philosophy? Because I think you've talked about a lot of things where the approach to soccer has become also an approach to life in many ways. I'm wondering if you could sum it up a little bit.
Really, at the end of the day, my philosophy is always, how can I contribute to this world in a, I don't know how to say this really. I want to always be in a position where I'm helping others, where, I feel like as if I'm in a I don't judge others. That's a big thing that I've come to think is when you stop judging things and judging people, it's like a release. There's like a burden to judge things, because you're always in a state of analyzing and, this and that, and strong feelings in it. So I want to be a non-judgmental, open soul, somebody that is, approachable and that serves this world in somehow or other, and I fulfill my purpose, whatever that is. And at this moment, I think it's giving back to a sport and to a group of women that deserve a great experience in college. So for me, at this exact moment, it's specific where I want to go into the office every day and kind of provide them with something that's going to make their lives a little bit better, and in turn, my life is better, because you always have that exchange with people when you're that open.
And so just speaking about choices and decision making, the last piece I want to talk with you about is the idea of coaching, and where do you go as an athlete in terms of performance at the Olympic. You can sustain that for a certain period of time in your life, and I'm curious, how do you see the rest of your career unfolding for yourself, and where do you see it moving or shifting towards?
Well, you have these crazy pinnacle goals. You have another World Cup in front of us, and one in which we're hosting, one in which we don't have to qualify for. So you have those goals. You have that, and then the Rio Olympics, and it's kind of like, okay, that's the end. That's the end. And from now until then, as an athlete, what does that look like for me? And I've done it already for these past 3 years, and now I have another 3 years to prepare. And you learn. Inevitably, you learn lessons on how you're going to go about things. I figured out my eating regimen, what works for my body. It took a while. The training efficiency, I know my weaknesses, therefore I can work on them, and therefore I can balance my body again. I think you have to take it day by day, because I want to arrive at those amazing, incredible events that I'd be super honored to be part of again. But that has nothing to do with right now. It's great to have a goal. Obviously, you have to, your motivation comes from, it's very interesting, all different sorts. So if my goal is to play in that World Cup, great, but maybe that will get me out of bed in the morning. But it's about today, so maximizing every single day. So it's connecting all the dots that I feel like have been a little scattered over the past 3 years. Like I said, they came together this past year, which was wonderful, but there's more. Like, there's always more. So because I believe that, I think I'm going to continue every day to strive to figure out what that more means.
So that's really about pushing limits then?
Absolutely, yeah. The limits are just self-imposed. I've always believed that.
Well, that wraps everything up there, Carmelina. Thank you so much for doing the interview. Well, I look forward to seeing you in the World Cup, and
thanks. I hope I'm there too.
Yeah.
That'd be great.
Okay, you take care.
You too. Take care.
Okay, bye-bye.